So when I was a kid, every birthday, my mom would make this chocolate cake, and she made it with mayonnaise. It was like the best chocolate cake. You wouldn't think that mayonnaise would make the best chocolate cake. But more importantly than the chocolate cake, Mom would make this peanut butter icing. And it's the simplest little recipe, which I can't divulge on here because she would get really upset at me.
Oh, yeah. No, we definitely can't share.
But there's 4 or 5 ingredients, depending.
It depends. And when you gave it to me, you did omit an ingredient, maybe on purpose, maybe not. It's unclear.
But she would make this peanut butter icing. And, even when I was a little kid, there was times that there really wasn't any money. There wasn't going to be presents or very many at all. Maybe a new toothbrush, maybe some socks. But this cake was always amazing. And I think she put all of her love into this cake. Birthdays were really special to her, and celebrating them really, I think for us, you felt as a kid that she wanted the best hope for a new year for you. So I always got the cake, and my brother's birthday was earlier. It was in March, and back then it seemed to snow a lot, and we would make homemade ice cream, and you pack the snow in the ice cream maker, and he also got the cake too. I didn't get the ice cream because there wasn't snow in April when my birthday is. But the point is, for all of us, just how special birthdays are. And at least when we think about this podcast, and a topic that we want to talk about is, celebrating Nana's birthday.
And I think because she always made birthdays such a big deal, it was always really important to us to make her birthday a really big deal. And so, today on the Hey Woman podcast, my mom, Julie, and I are going to go through thinking about Nan's birthday, which is, as we're recording it, coming up, but when the podcast comes out, we'll have passed, kind of what we're doing to mark her first birthday since she's passed away. But we're also going to talk about different things that we did while caregiving for her birthday, because we went through a couple of different transitions with the birthday, and it made it really difficult. She had some mobility issues, and for her birthday was an excuse to get out of the village where she was living. I don't know, she acted like we never took her anywhere. But she definitely was not celebrating within the 4 walls of the village. That was definitely not okay. And so, but taking her out sometimes was really complicated. She had limited mobility, and so we're going to talk about, some of the decisions we made, whether they were right or wrong, but they were made and we moved forward. And I think, for caregivers, it can really feel like, oh my God, it's just one more thing that I have to do. And maybe you feel like you're already not doing things well. And so, it's kind of this annual reminder of, oh my God, I have to do this one more thing. It feels like this big project. And then there's a guilt that comes with that, because you're like, I want to celebrate this person. I'm happy that they made it to another birthday, right? Because there could be a diagnosis, there could be something that you're dealing with. And so when you're making it to this next birthday, it's exciting, but it's also really stressful sometimes.
Yeah, and that's, for those of you who have been listening to other episodes, or if you're new to us, we want to welcome you, because that's the whole point of this podcast, is real conversations where we acknowledge that caregiving is hard. And I know, when we think about the birthday thing, I was definitely her primary caregiver, although supported by many other people. But it was definitely at times it could feel like, oh my goodness, one more thing. And yet I was going to do something to celebrate and to honor her, because birthdays were so important to her, and she had celebrated and honored my birthday my whole life. But now, instead of just having to take care of her, I had to wrangle, other family members, grandkids that were, going to college, different places, and how do we get people's schedules together? And so, at first, I do think we just want to acknowledge that this makes it harder. Doesn't mean you don't do it, but just being able to say that this is another thing, and that you have to make time for it, and you have to plan and ask for help. But I think, we're going to ask some questions on here, ask people to ask some questions about, birthdays. And we're going to talk about some great ideas for celebrating birthdays. But I think one of the first questions we have to ask is, whatever's being celebrated, is that just going to make it harder for the caregiver? And if so, even if you're the caregiver, that's an honest consideration that you should be thinking about, doing something at your house, and then having everybody over, and then you have to clean your house, and you have to cook, and you have to do everything. Maybe that's what you want to do, because maybe that brings you peace in some ways. But maybe you're like, that is the last thing I want to do. And, maybe we should, reach out to others to make it more a potluck, bring stuff, or get it catered, or, I think that that's just really important that we think about how does this birthday celebration not just affect the person who is being cared for, but the caregiver themselves.
And I think you always have to balance that with the second question, which is this what the person wants?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we think about this is what they've wanted their whole life. And so we get so stuck in this is what we've done year after year. And so obviously this is how we would celebrate their birthday. But maybe their thoughts have changed. Some people, I feel, really come to terms with where they're at mobility-wise, diagnosis-wise, and they might want something smaller or quieter or something like that. Nan never really shrunk herself down.
No.
She was not about to be held back. And so, when we ask those two questions, what does she want and does it make it harder for the caregiver? What she wanted did make it harder for the caregiver. She wanted to go out. She wanted to go out to dinner. She wanted to have a nice drink, which sometimes she was on some medication that made that not a good idea. But she wanted a more formal dinner, and that was really hard because she also wanted all of the grandkids to be there. And her birthday's the end of August. As we got older, I was in Boston, my brother was in North Carolina, my cousin Lexi was an hour away at Penn State, but she's an engineering major. They don't start slow in Calc 3. You just kind of throw you in there, right? So for her, even being an hour away, it was still a commitment to come back home. And so if we think about what she wanted, which was dinner with the grandkids, we tried doing that earlier in the month before everybody kind of scattered back to college or, back to wherever. That doesn't count for her birthday then, right?
No, it didn't. It was a back to school thing. She was appreciative, but it didn't count for the birthday.
Very much enjoyed herself, but it doesn't count for the birthday. And so that did make it harder for the caregiver because now instead of doing one thing, we're doing two.
Yeah.
But, that was what she wanted. And so that's what we did. But I think, one of the biggest things of taking Nan out was the bathroom because she had her walker and she had her limited mobility. And so, sometimes we would take her out. There was this local bar, American style food that she really liked, but the bathroom was horrendous, getting her in and out of there. And so she couldn't go there. So even though what she wanted, there were still some parameters, usually chain restaurants, although some people prefer, not to celebrate, we definitely prefer mom and pop, restaurants, local restaurants, but typically places that are a little bit more commercialized or chains, they have handicap accessible bathrooms.
Right.
Which can be a huge consideration and can make it easier for the caregiver because she was able to take, it seems like a silly thing. And it's really not something you think about until you're staring at a bathroom and you're like, my gosh, how am I getting her walker into this bathroom?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that as you grandchildren would take her to the doctor and do those types of things I shared with you that, because, even I know this is about the birthday, but, when, the grandkids would take her to the doctor, she was always going to want to eat on the way home. And I didn't want anybody to get into a situation where they hadn't thought through the bathroom thing. And so I would say to everybody, think about the chain restaurants, even though that's not where she wants to go, you're more likely to hit a bathroom that you can help maneuver her or that she can be more independent even. And I think that's important. And I think, with this, even when we're talking about, the birthday, I think, we're talking about it because it's happening now. But, part of the planning had to start earlier for me to even get input from everybody that she would want there as far as what's everybody's schedule, and you talked about kids going back to college. Like, so were people going to come home? Were they not going to be able to this year? What was that celebration going to be? And luckily, we were able to often have almost everybody there. But the reality of it is, in some families, it's not going to be able to be a realistic, and they're not going to be able. And I think part of that too is, if you're a caregiver out there and you're caring for somebody where their birthday is coming up, I'd encourage you to start talking about it earlier, 2 months ahead of time. Particularly if it's important to you that people show up, because as being the person who is that primary caregiver, it's also hard when you're disappointed that people don't show up.
Right.
And I think one of the best lessons I ever learned in business and in life was from a person named Bill Hammond, who was my business coach. And one of the things he taught me was that if I didn't get what I wanted from somebody else, he really, really, truly believed that it was because he didn't communicate well enough. And, I have a little bit more of a reactionary personality where I'm like, they didn't do what I want, and I'm upset. That really gets you nowhere. And through, this gift of being able to interact with Bill and see him really live that out, I've been able to kind of take that on. And so if you've had a celebration, I don't care if it's Christmas, a birthday, something that was important to the person that you're caregiving for, and your family didn't show up in the way that you hoped for them, and that causes you stress, the first thing I would suggest that you do is take a step back and think about, did you communicate well enough? And I know that's hard, and our first instinct is like, yeah, I asked them. But I think one of the wonderful things about texting is that you're able to not have to call 7 people. You can send out a text and ask for what you want. And so if there's a celebration coming up, we're not that far out from Christmas, or Thanksgiving, something's important, I'd encourage you to text and start talking about what it is the person that you're caregiving for would want, what you think it would look like. And ask for, people to show up in whatever way you want them to, and start having that conversation. I'd say even 2 months ahead of time. And, and I just kind of think about, that's probably when I started thinking about it, and start getting people to interact with you. And, there's going to be people on that text that don't text back. And there's going to be people that can't show up. There's going to be people who give you, suggestions that you're going to be like, that does not work at all. But at least it's engagement. And I think that's the first part of that is, setting out those expectations, and asking, communicate. And then, the second is, ask for the help that you need. So if you're that caregiver and, maybe you don't have to get the dessert, you don't have to get everything, or somebody else can look into where could you go, or, maybe for your loved one, they like to stay, in, and we're all going to go there. What are those ideas? And especially I would say to you, rely on a younger generation if they exist, because one of the things that Cortney and all the grandkids did for me is they have new ideas that I didn't even know about. It wouldn't even have come across my mind to do new and different things. And I think that's really helpful. So I think, birthdays are really important. And my advice is, thinking about whatever it is, we, already talked about, it doesn't make it harder for you. We talked about, is it really what this person wants at this point in time? But then, once you kind of decide, start communicating about what it is, what the plan is, and how we're going to do that. And hopefully at the end of the day, my hope for you, if you're listening to this and your loved one's still alive, is that you can make those celebrations as good as possible and enjoy some of the time rather than being burdened by it. And that's an okay feeling, because that's often what it really does feel like, as, we sit here just about to celebrate Mom's first birthday without her, which is so hard to even say, much less to walk through that. we're always going to sit and think about what could we have done more. That's just my personality, but I think at some point in time too, I'm glad for what we were able to do and honor her. And I think we should, spend some time kind of thinking about what is it people can do. I don't know, Court, if you have any thoughts of any suggestions of how you can make a birthday celebration different or what people can do.
I think one of the places that people should think to communicate is if your loved one is in a facility of some sort, a personal care home, a nursing home, one, seeing if they have like a space to celebrate. Sometimes celebrate in the resident's room might not be feasible. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the room's not big enough, but lots of times they have like conference room spaces that are really nice that you can get in and decorate. So the first thing, when you start communicating to family members and you start getting an idea of how many people, is really like you can do some really neat things like at the facility. If your loved one's still at home, obviously what the capacity of your house is. But so I think that's also a piece of communication. But as far as like what you can do,
Well, Cor, before you get off of that, I think like from the facility standpoint, I own a personal care home. I'm a part owner of one. And just so you know, like we love it when families bring in that energy and want to have a party or do something special for their loved one. And, don't dismiss the fact that that's also really nice for the employees who spend their days with your loved one. And so I think there can be I would say don't be hesitant about that. I think about some families who have come to us and like had something really special planned, maybe because it was like an 80th or an 85 or a 90th birthday. And they were really, really nice. And I think that's good for the loved one. It's good for the community. It also gives your loved one something to look forward to, something to talk about after it happens. And so I don't want that to be kind of glossed over, because I think people don't utilize that enough just because maybe they don't know to ask. And obviously places can be different, but there's no harm in asking.
Exactly. Because even if they say no, you're no worse off than when you were when you started. So I definitely think that's a phone call worth making. I also think, people should rethink about like gifts and different things like that. So, for Nan, especially if somebody like couldn't come home, sending dessert, right? Like there's so many places you can ship lovely desserts from. And so, sending, that helps the caregiver, right? Because that's one less thing that they have to worry about. The box is just going to show up. They just have to unpack it. So I think that can be a really neat thing to do. I think also,
though I have to tell you, they can't ship the mayonnaise chocolate cake with peanut butter icing.
They can't. No, that probably doesn't translate. But, there are like lots of things that can be shipped. But I also think, one thing is thinking about like necessities. So if you think about, the caregiver just spent all this time like planning this birthday party and all of this stuff. And if you're a person that's sitting there being like, gosh, I can't come, the last thing that caregiver wants to do is then turn around and like get the groceries that the like person needs. So thinking about, can you get gifts for your loved one that also then help the caregiver that they get really excited about. So I know lots of times like we would get Nan like her makeup remover wipes.
Very important.
They were, and she loved them. And then it was one less thing that you had to worry about because she had something that she could take her makeup off. And the thing is that like that idea might not work for everybody, but it was something that was really important to her, and it would have been a really big deal if she ran out of them. Other things I had done was really like kind of spread her birthday out, because there was so much focus on that day that I sometimes would get her like a 3-month subscription service to something, and then she would get something in the mail like on the 28th of the month for the next 3 months or something like that. And then she would call me and she would tell me about like what she got in the mail, and that kind of like extended the joy, which was helpful for the caregiver because it gave you something to open with her, something to talk to her about. So I think also thinking about things that kind of like extend or can help the caregiver like later on down the road. Because the reality of it is the answer to the question of, is this harder on the caregiver, might be yes. And it might be that doesn't matter and we have to move forward with it anyway. It also can be, yes, it's going to be harder and therefore we're doing something else, which is a totally valid way to think about it. But I think sometimes you and I came down on the side of, yes, what she wants is going to be more difficult, but we're doing it anyway because that's what she would have wanted. I also think never discount flowers. So Nan always loved flowers, and we used to send flowers every year on her birthday, and she would call me and she would identify each flower individually. Like there wasn't a picture on 1-800-Flowers when I ordered them. But you can set up recurring subscriptions so that they, just arrive. I did handpick them each year. But I knew what kind of flowers that she wanted. And so when I think about, just to take this into what I decided to do this year for her birthday to celebrate it is, I sent flowers to you, spoiler alert, they're coming on Friday, and all of the granddaughters. We're all getting flowers, and just a moment in the day to think about doing something that Nan would have liked, and so it felt uncomfortable not to order them. It's funny, flowers seem to be such a big deal. I, on here talked about breaking down in Wegmans because I didn't buy her an Easter flower, and I just walked out. I couldn't buy them at all. So I would say the fact that I was actually able to put my credit card into 1-800-Flowers and order them is, we're making a step in the right direction a couple of months later, but it's hard, and that might not be something that everybody wants to do. I also did order myself flowers just because, I wasn't going to leave myself out. But so, as the caregiver, to celebrate either while they're still with you or not, don't be afraid to do something for yourself that day, because in so many ways it's a celebration of you helping them get to one more birthday. And I think we'd be remiss to say there's an emotional part of that day that you never know which one's going to be the last one.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard to face, of you're so excited that they got to one more birthday, but we're not sure how many are left.
When I would say, if we think about Nan's birthday last year, I certainly didn't think it was her last birthday.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't until October where she had, please know, I knew there weren't a lot more left, but it wasn't until a few months later where she really kind of took that turn. That was the first time she wasn't going to be able to power through it. And she had powered through so many difficult things. It really wasn't. And she wasn't, she wasn't that old, just, early 80s. And so I think that's important for people to be thinking about. I also think, just, taking a step back, because I want to make sure that we talk about flowers, we talk about all these things, but also, I would just say to everybody, again, being the person that was there who, had the gifts or, shared the gifts of her opening them, particularly if you're out of town. Also, just the really basics. Nan loved peanuts. She loved grapes. She loved just little things, even sending those things, because to be honest with you, if you're an out-of-town caregiver, if you're out of town and there's somebody that's boots on the ground, that person that's boots on the ground is probably spending a lot of their own money buying those kind of basic things that the loved one likes. I mean, Hershey bars, my goodness, Nan, I don't think I could go to CVS and not buy Hershey bars with the almonds because she loved them. And I think, also just restocking or resupplying those things in a box, and sending them can be really great, because it's I would have, as the caregiver, been whoosh, I don't have to worry about that this week, because there's stuff. And I would say to you, having been there while she received it, for some reason, when you send it from out of town, they taste better. I don't believe that's true, because we actually live close to Hershey, Pennsylvania, but about 2 hours away. But somehow, if the candy bars came from Boston, they were the best. So I just think it's important for everybody to really understand that it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a lot. Any type of support can both support that person who is being cared for and then their primary caregiver.
I think a really important point that we want to make with this, though, is this is not a license for the out-of-town person or the person that's working late, so they're not going to make it. Even if you're in town, that does not mean that you call the in-town caregiver, who's the primary caregiver, and say, I'll Venmo you $50 if you go pick up X, Y, and Z and you wrap it. Because let me tell you, like when you're in the thick of it, stopping at CVS and getting a gift bag and the tissue paper and putting all of the stuff in it actually is a really big deal. So if you're like ever a person who's like driven home and you've like forgotten an ingredient and you have to like stop at the freaking grocery store after a long day of work, multiply that by like 10, and that's how that person feels about stopping at CVS and picking up these snacks. What you really want to think about is it's not about the money. Like it's not about the fact that the caregiver spent the money. And so if you think, oh, I'll just send them $50, they can pick it up, it's not that big of a deal. It actually is a really big deal. And so I want people to think about like, yes, it can be inexpensive. It can be super helpful, but it's actually about you going and picking it up, taking it to the post office, putting it all in a box and shipping it. I mean, it gets a lot easier, right? Like you can ship the stuff from Amazon. You can ask them to gift wrap it or not. Like it doesn't have to be wrapped, but you could send the gift bag in the Amazon thing. Like if it all came in the same box, it's not that big of a deal to take it out of a box and put it in a bag. But don't ship the peanuts and the pretzels and not ship a gift bag and then ask the caregiver to go pick one up and just tell them that you'll pay them for it and think that that's okay. Because, you know, if we go back to
You tell this story as if it sounds like you've been asked to do it.
As an older sibling, so those of you that are listening as the eldest daughter and you've personally put holidays on your back, it is a really big deal.
I mean, I just, it's kind of coming across as like a little.
I hope my siblings are listening. That's what I'll tell you. Because at Christmas, if you ship it to me and you don't ship the gift wrap, it's not getting wrapped. Like, just send it. You can send anything on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's really important, like just to kind of, again, reach out to that out-of-town child that comes in and for any celebration or any holiday, you know, and again, this is just my observation. And this observation is not actually from my personal. It's actually, you know, I'm also a business coach. I'm an elder law attorney who also coaches elder law attorneys across the nation. And one of the things that, you know, in my coaching, we often get into caregiving. And I'll remember this one person who, you know, of course I won't name, but she was talking about just like how hard it was for her to like go visit her mom. And her sister was the primary caregiver. And, you know, this person would go and it was like as if her presence was
the gift,
right? And that everything was going to stop around it. And, you know, and I asked like, well, what did you do? Well, it seemed that her sister did a lot to make her feel welcome and do things for her. And I've also seen this in my, particularly my husband's extended family, where like, you know, out of town kids come home and you see this one, you know, daughter who is just like holding everything together. But then the out of town kid comes home and then all of a sudden, like everybody wants a party because that out of town kid's there. That's not helpful.
It's not.
I would say to you, like your first job as being an out of town person who comes home is not to be celebrated for coming home. It's first to, you know, honor and visit your loved one who's aging, or dealing with whatever diagnosis, and to help that person. But your second job is to give that caregiver that's there day in and day out a break, not to put more on that person. And I bring this up, and I'm sorry if people are upset by it, but unfortunately, I just see it a lot. I see it in my job. I see it, you know, both as a coach, but as an elder law attorney. And I don't think people mean to do it, but I think you have to think about if you're coming home, like say for a birthday celebration, and you want to like go visit people and go see all this stuff and have this whole big thing, then maybe you need a different trip for that. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you need to start putting that thing together and, you know, that celebration together. Maybe you need to pay to get it catered. Maybe you need to do things or decide that it's going to be at, you know, a restaurant, and you go ahead and get those reservations. And please know, I'm sure there's many people who are listening who do exactly what I'm talking about and get it. But I would say to you, there's some people that I see that really don't get it. You know, and again, personally, I didn't deal with that because everybody who came home was really there to help mom. And quite honestly, it was often I would tag out So, grandkids are home, like you need to take her to the doctor. And I really needed that, because this, again, we're not talking about 6 months here. We're talking about years. We're talking about chapters in my life that changed, good times at work, hard times at work. We're talking about my own transitions going on of kids leaving and going to college. Like life marches on. Right. For that caregiver. And sometimes it's easier than other times while you're dealing with this. So I think that's really important, and beyond just the birthday. But, birthdays are birthdays. Any other thoughts about how to celebrate a birthday differently or in the best manner?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't discount like getting takeout and bringing it back to the person. I also think it could be a day, sometimes like spa treatment, sometimes, that's not their thing or they can't get into a spa. But I think, Nan was always so happy because on her birthday, she'd take the extra time to get a shower the way that she wanted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great place for it not to be the primary caregiver that does it, but maybe somebody else is able to really like come in, help her get a shower, do her hair. I know for her 80th birthday, Steph and I actually took the afternoon off and we took her to get a pedicure. Which was a really big deal for her. And we took it to a spa that we knew they would like help her like up into the bowl. She was still moving like pretty good at that point, but was a little bit limited. So those things like can be really nice. But she also was really happy just to get like a takeout hoagie and like sit and eat it outside. So her birthday was in August. So like never also thinking about, what the weather's like where you live. August in Pennsylvania, it's pretty warm. You can sit outside and eat. Mm-hmm. If her birthday had been in January, I'm not sure that we were doing that. But I also think that's important to think about too. Can you do something outside or something like that? Or if you're not the primary caregiver, if we think about like getting the person ready, sometimes that was like a part-time job and it could take a couple of hours until she showered and got herself around and did her hair and did her makeup. And it was rushed on so many days because it had to fit into a certain schedule. And that was the day when she shouldn't have to. So if it took 2 hours, it took 2 hours. And so kind of coming to terms with that. But I think that goes back to the point that Mom, you made in the beginning, which is you have to start planning for it earlier. Because if you think about it like 2 days before, you're not going to have the 2 hours or have somebody to help you. And then it just becomes this thing. And then you started off on the wrong foot because now she's frustrated that she didn't have enough time to get ready and it's her birthday. Also sending a nice new outfit or something like that can always be like a good thing. But I think thinking about like, what does that person want? Not what if they wanted their whole life, but what do they want today? And how do we make that happen in the best way possible without burdening the primary caregiver?
One of the things that I think, we talk about as like, what do they want now? You talk about going to the spa. Clearly that was really, really important to her. But there was times that like she couldn't. And, at the end, I would sit and give her a pedicure or a manicure. And she really liked that. And it's funny, I think back now, like, how dumb am I? Like, it took me a long time to figure that out. Like, I would be like, okay, where could I take her? When could I take off? Like, how could I do this? And I'd spend so much time thinking about that. And then, I don't know, one night I'm just there thinking, gosh, she has all these like tools. I could just sit here and do it. And, really, that was one, it gave me something to do with her that was positive, that, helped her, not think about her pain for a little bit. And it really, she really appreciated it. And, at the end of the day, she may have appreciated that more than being taken someplace. And I would say to you, don't ever underestimate too the power of touch. So as people age and they don't get touched as much, and it is kind of an intimate thing, and I don't mean in any weird way, but to like take care of somebody that way, to give them a pedicure, to give them a manicure, to be touched in a way that's not just like, the doctor examining you or something. But I think that's a really important thing, and I think that was able for Mom and I to connect in a way that she really knew that I cared for her. I mean, anybody that's willing to like touch somebody else's toes, like,
right. No, it could not be me.
I could have had gloves on at some point in time, but, like anybody that's willing to do that. But I think that, that was something that she really liked. And it took me a while to figure that out. And then I just started doing that like kind of once a week. Like I'd get the stuff out, be like, okay, Mom. And we would just be talking and I would be like, but she really appreciated that. So again, it kind of goes with that idea that I think for so much, whether it's birthdays or just caring, we get stuck in like what we did before. We don't like take a step back and think about, okay, well, how could I do that kind of the same thing now, even if it's a little bit different? And for me, that was just doing that. And then, that was also something, again, I could say to like grandchildren, well, if they don't know what to do when they're visiting, giving her a manicure. I never asked any of the grandkids to do the pedicure. I did that myself. But the manicure was something that she likes, and it gives them something to do because, and I think that's so important to try to make the visit easier for anybody that's going in of any age. And so that was one of the things that I know some of the granddaughters, particularly like Steph, would be like, okay, I'm going to go give Nan a manicure. And then like the conversation just happens while you're doing it rather than sitting there staring at each other, wondering what's the next topic that I can talk about. And particularly when cognition is declining, I think, again, in Nan's situation, we had a situation where it was declining a little bit, not like a dementia, but because of that lack of oxygen. And there's lots of medical conditions that, oxygen's affected and cognition can come and go a little bit. And that's just a way to kind of fill that time or that space with something nice. But I think at the end of the day, here we are on this podcast talking about Nan's birthday. And my hope in this episode for everybody is if you're caring for somebody to, kind of think about it, because this year I'm taking, part of the day off, maybe the whole day. And I think to myself, why didn't I do that last year? And, all of this, there's ups and downs with what we did well, with regrets that we have. And what I hope this episode did for you is just to kind of make you understand it's okay that this is hard, and to encourage you to, think about how do you want to celebrate birthdays, holidays, and how do you want to get your caregiving community to be part of that to help you and the person that you're caring for.
And I think I always want to underscore that what we're doing is one choice that we're making, and we're in no way sitting here saying that it's the right choice. So I've actually had Nan's birthday blocked out of my calendar since January. So for those of you that have been with us from our birthday episodes and Easter, you'll know that we don't people well. I didn't know what I wanted to do on her birthday this year for a long time. I'm still not sure that I'm 100%.
But crying in front of people was not really your first option.
No, it really wasn't on the list. Like, I knew I was not going to be in a place to have meetings or do different things like that. Like, I knew I was not going to be in a position, and it wasn't fair to the staff that reported to me to ask me questions when I knew my fuse would be so much shorter. Some people may prefer to go to work. And I think that's really okay. They might prefer just to treat it like a normal day, or, do something in the evening or in the morning, and they might prefer the distraction of work. And that's totally okay. Like, I think what we're trying to make sure that you understand is that you make the best decision for yourself. So we're just here to open up
an intentional decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than it happening to you.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. So often in caregiving, I think, and in the grief journey, people let things happen to them. And I think, what we're trying to really do is have you sit down for a moment when you feel like you don't have a moment, and kind of take back some of the control by intentionally deciding what you want to do. And so, for me, I'm going to Maine for the day. So Nan used to spend, for a couple of years, she spent about half of her year in Maine. And I'm not going to any of her favorites. I might go to her favorite ice cream place, but
it would be hard to drive by.
Exactly. But I'm actually taking the dog to Algonquin or Kennebunkport. There's like a little.
The dog has a name, Minnie.
Minnie. I'm taking Minnie.
I think she would be upset not to be named.
That's
go
fair.
ahead.
I'm going to take Minnie, and we are going to go for a walk on the water. There's like a 1.5 mile trail. We'll probably go get some ice cream. I don't think you can actually drive into the state of Maine and not get a lobster roll, so we'll probably do that as well. Well, I will. She'll have ice cream. And, kind of spend the day that way. And, it took me, I'll be honest, like, I've been thinking about Nan's birthday for about a month. It probably took me a month to come up with that. Like, I had thought about a bunch of different things. And, I live in Boston, so it'll only be like an 1.5 hour drive for me. And for you, it's not really an option because driving 10 hours to Maine for the day isn't really something that you're able to do. But I'm not able to go to the cemetery because
Right.
I decided not to drive home. And I think, I struggled with that decision for a little bit. Part of the reason I've decided not to drive home is, I'm spending the rest of that weekend actually with my sister. College football kicks off.
Well, we all have to have our priorities.
Exactly. And so, I'm going to my sister's house in Connecticut for the first Notre Dame game of the season. And so, that was just a lot of driving. But I think balancing doing something hard with doing something I would normally do, which is, watch the game with my sister or doing something fun. So again, like life doesn't stop just because we're caregiving and we have to do different things.
Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We started this podcast, Hey Woman, real conversations on caregiving, legacy, and love. And our desire is just to make this a community for you and to feel that, maybe you're a phone call away from or a podcast away from just kind of hearing honest conversations about just how hard this is.
And so for people that have been following along, we ask you to rate us, to follow us on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Also to take a look at planningandprotecting.com, which has a lot of really great resources for you as you continue to navigate either the caregiving journey or the grief journey as well.